Okay, so welcome everybody to the Third Legacy Tradition 1 study. We're here at Seattle Intergroup, and we have quite a group of people that are attending, which is great. Thanks everybody for being here. Tonight our format will be 3 10-minute speakers on Tradition 1, and then we will open it up for other people to either ask questions or share their experience, strength, and hope concerning Tradition 1. And so we have 3 panelists, and tonight the first panelist is Jeffrey F., and I'll turn it over to Jeffrey.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, my name's Jeffrey F. I'm an alcoholic. Jeffrey.
Hi, Jeffrey.
And my home group is Pass It On, and I am the intergroup rep for that group, and which has connected me back to intergroup, which I'm glad that it has, because I'm amongst old friends and new friends. So I'm going to read Tradition 1. Long form. Each member of Alcoholics Anonymous is but a small part of a great whole. AA must continue to live, or most of us will surely die. Hence, our common welfare comes first, but individual welfare follows close afterwards. And you know, I mean, if a lot of times you're in a group and you'll hear things like, well, the 12 steps are to the individual as the traditions are to the group. However, I was taught that the traditions were just as important as the steps to the individual. You know, when I was brought into Alcoholics Anonymous, on the title page, there was the circle and triangle, and it was pointed out to me that there were 3 legacies of service and 12 steps, 12 traditions, and 12 concepts of service. And it was explained that I can incorporate all those into my life. And if I was only working steps, I was leaving another 24 spiritual principles on the table. So of course, the 12 steps were first, and the steps are guided by those 12 traditions. And then the traditions were written, a little history somewhere around 12 years after by Bill. It was put together. And so the one thing that I liked about the second legacy of service was that unity. And, you know, without unity, you know, so it says in the short form that our personal recovery depends upon AA unity, which tells me that in order for me to recover, I need to unite with a group. And so, you know, the first group that I was in was a group called Drunks Are Us, and we got quiet and prayed about all our traditions and tried to figure out all about what it was all about, and we found out pretty quickly that the new person was the lifeblood of our meeting. But if you're going to have some lifeblood, you're going to need a heart to pump through. And when you read about the first tradition, they talk about that unity is the heartbeat, and that our experience is like that. So they kind of just, you know, it was kind of more of a metaphor about that. But, you know, unity means more than one. So, you know, I tell the guys that I work with, I say, well, you know, you should look at the traditions. And I want to thank Stephen for inviting me, because I haven't looked at the traditions in a long time. I went through the cartoon pamphlet, which I like, is great illustrated, and that will go into like the common welfare of a meeting, and each group will decide what their guidelines are, because the traditions aren't rules, they're more of a guidelines to follow. And sometimes the group has to decide how to handle, you know, drunks in the meeting. Imagine that, a drunk in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and how to handle that. Or, you know, in our early meeting at Drunks Are Us, we noticed that a lot of mothers were showing up with babies. So we had to create, you know, a babysitting committee to where the babies could go, because we didn't want to disrupt the meeting. And that happens in our group. Sometimes people will kind of hijack the meeting with their agendas and go on and on about it. And so I just went through a workshop at Pass It On our secretaries on how we have a guidelines on how to run the meeting. And they're kind of loose guidelines, but we wanted to have all the secretaries read it so that when people came in, follow those guidelines. And I did make some notes to kind of follow up on. I also tell people in my home group that I'm working with that don't have a home group, it's a good thing to get a home group, because otherwise you're homeless in Alcoholics Anonymous. So that's another reason why you should get a home group. And they're governed by those traditions, which helps people stay in line, I think. So I talked a little bit about the common welfare, and usually when we're talking, because it couldn't be our common welfare and our personal recovery meaning the same thing. So when you're talking about the common welfare, I believe we're talking about the common welfare of our group as a whole. And within a group as a whole, there's no person that's more important than anybody else. And so that was another thing that I learned early on is to know my place in a home group. So one of the things that I learned about knowing my place was understanding humility, which I had mixed up with humiliation for a long time, but wasn't where I ended up with the humility. It is to know your place. It's like, so for me, and I heard this most recently, what I want to pass on is humility isn't thinking less of yourself, like in humiliation. It's think less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. And so when you think of yourself less, what happens is you start to think of others. And when you become others-centered in a group, you begin to experience that humility. So in the principle surrounding the 12 steps are to have a spiritual experience, to get in meditation and hear the direction of God. When you're in a group setting, it is to sit within a group, to get the group conscious, to talk about their relationship with that God will speak through the group. And I'll give you two examples of that. One, in that early group, Drunks Are Us, we wrote the format, but somebody had decided that they didn't want to hear the Lord's Prayer anymore, ending at the end of the meeting. And so we had this big hoo-ha about it, and we talked on and on about it. So we decided to end the meeting with the prayer of your choice. And so the meeting ended, and the chairperson said, would you like to end the meeting with the prayer of your choice? And then they said, yes, we'll end with the Lord's Prayer. And so it was kind of funny, because after all that stuff, it just went back to the tradition, the way the group was doing it. And that was really cool. And then one other time where group conscious showed up for me was when I was in Dallas, Texas. My home group was the Cornerstone Group. This goes back probably 10 years ago. But the original manuscript for the Big Book, with all the notes and all the type and all of that, was given to the printer who printed the Big Book. That was the deal that Bill and the AA members made with this printer. And so the printer puts it on the shelf, and 80 years later, after he has passed on, or I guess it'd be 75 because 10 years ago, his grandson, one of the family members, decided that they were going to sell the original manuscript. And oh my God, did Alcoholics Anonymous throw a fit. And within our home group, we were discussing this within our home group. And then what came out of somebody's mouth is, that's it, we're not sending GSO any more money. And then everybody jumped on that. And then this kind elderly lady, she was probably closer to 90 than she was 80. She just, in a real timid voice, said, well, I've been in this group for a long time, and that principle that does not go along with the spiritual principles that we have been guiding this group with. And then that shifted everything back to, yeah, we'll keep sending GSO money. So, and I think the other thing that I just wanted to say is that thank you guys for letting me have the opportunity to share a little bit about it. I hope you got something out of that from what I said.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Jeffrey. All right, then we're going to turn it over to Lisa.
Right, thank you. Hi, guys. Lisa, alcoholic. Thanks for inviting me um, to share on this, Laura, because it's keeping me a little honest. I only recently come into the program over the past. I have like 14 months now, and I went through the steps, and I have a sponsee, and we've gone through the steps. But when it comes to the traditions, I was just kind of reading through the thing, and and a lot of it doesn't quite make a ton. If you don't know where the relevancy is, I kind of, would read through the traditions, but not really understand them or what the real point of them is. And so I kind of did a deep dive because I'm a big nerd. And so I was like, I listened to original Bill W. talk on the traditions. That was a recording where he went through all the traditions and talked about where their origins were from and all that. And basically, and I liked your point, Jeff, where we're saying like the steps are for the person, the traditions are for the group, and the concepts are for like nationwide and international. But it almost seemed like when Bill was talking, it was more too that the traditions are about the individuals in the group, right? Keeping the individuals like keyed into the main purpose of what this big group was. And so it was talking about like lots of just chaos of these different groups and everyone wanting different affiliations and doing their own thing. And what it did is it made it less attractive and accessible for newcomers to come in because they were getting told different messages, all these different things. There was no consistency among the AA philosophy amongst groups. So they developed the traditions to kind of at least keep it in line so that there was some reference points for when groups were going off the rails in different ways of discussion. They could kind of bring it back to these core principles. And I really like too how they all feed into one another. Like if you kind of like take tradition 5 or whatever and refer it back to tradition 1, it kind of it's all about keeping different individuals in check so that things don't go amok. But what really made sense to me, so I was reading through like watching these videos and reading different things. I listened to a bunch of podcasts that were cool. And my sponsor was trying to get me to do traditions for relationships. Well, so we were like, okay. So we kind of were doing these traditions for relationship questions after we read tradition 1. And some of these questions are, and this can be any relationship, right? They talk about bringing the traditions in your workplace, bringing the traditions in your marriage, in your child rearing, all these things we can actually apply to. We just substitute AA or whatever, or our home group for our home family, right? So some of these relationship questions that we were answering were, when am I willing to sacrifice for our relationship? What effect do my actions have on our relationship? Am I a giver or a taker? Do I do unifying things or am I quick to criticize? Do I use silence as a refuge or punishment while expecting my mate to read my mind? Do I listen?
That's enough, Lisa. No, I'm kidding.
Okay. Anyway, so we were doing these relationship questions and they were good. And, I'm kind of like going through them. But then I found the real traditions checklist that groups and individuals use online. And in those questions, I was like, oh, well, this would have been a lot more helpful if we'd gone through these questions because it really put it in relevancy more for what the tradition means to the AA group. And then it was funny because she was like, well, dummy, I already gave you those things. Look back in your pamphlet. But so we laughed about that. But the checklist traditions from the AA Grapevine ran that started November 1969 are as follows. So for our common welfare should come first, personal recovery depends upon AA unity. Am I in my group a healing, mending, integrating person, or am I divisive? What about gossip and taking other members' inventories? Am I a peacemaker? Or do I, with pious preludes, such as just for the sake of discussion, plunge into an argument? Am I gentle with those who rub me the wrong way, or am I abrasive? Do I make competitive AA marks, such as comparing one group with another or contrasting AA in one place with AA in another? Do I put down some AA activities as if I were superior for not participating in this or that aspect of AA? Am I informed about AA as a whole? Do I support in every way I can AA as a whole, or just the parts I understand and approve of? Am I as considerate of AA members as I want them to be of me? Do I spout platitudes about love while indulging in and secretly justifying behavior that bristles with hostility? Do I go to enough AA meetings or read enough AA literature to really keep in touch? Do I share with AA all of me, the bad and the good, accepting as well as the giving help of fellowship? So when I read those questions, I was like, oh, well, that makes a lot more sense, kind of like as an individual, how I can help my home group stay unified, right? And it's like, it's so easy to just be about me and my opinion. And, and I have a lot, we're alcoholics, so we have lots of opinions, right? It's really hard to kind of break that and take that humility aspect. And that for me, humility, when I think of it, it's like, guess what? I don't fucking know everything. Right? I don't know everything. So I can accept like, oh, maybe I could look at this in a different way. Maybe I can be open to what other people say. Sorry for swearing. And I love those questions because it really actually, and I'm so glad that Laura asked me to do this because it really helped me kind of turn my vision around and remember, it's not what AA can do for me. Right? AA, like the group, I was able to quit drinking. I haven't for 14 months and I'm so grateful for it. But turning it around and recognizing that if I was hearing a bunch of like catty crap in my group, if there was a lot of like, complaining and like whispering or whatever, it would have totally turned me off. Right. And so I'm just really lucky that the groups I found have been so open and welcoming. I have been to some business meetings. I have seen some bristling and some kind of like weirdo googly eyes people make, you know what I mean? Like you can tell when people's egos start getting tested. And so this is a really great idea for me to investigate and just incorporate into my practice. And I'm really excited to share this with my sponsees as we go through. Another thing when I was talking to my sponsor about this, her name's Kate D. She's down in Olympia. She's awesome. I'm sure some of you guys know her. What she was saying, and one thing that they do is like group inventories is when they're looking at their own group as a whole for Tradition 1. And when she's like looking at groups in general and kind of like, well, kind of judging them, but just asking some questions about the group. Like, does my group keep up to date with AA literature and changes in the program? Do they do a yearly inventory to look at their own practices and make sure that they're kind of upholding the traditions? Do they donate to district and national causes? Are they involved with AA at the local level? And do they make a priority for that? Do they have service members that are participating? Are they actively bringing in newcomers, or is it the same old group? And so she kind of was saying those, and I was like, oh, it just makes me really grateful for this in-depth look about how I can really create a rich tradition for myself and my sponsees and my group in general, and be able to ask some of these questions that keep us honest. Because when we are comfortable every day, we're not growing. And that's what I've learned through you guys anyway. So I feel like that's going to be my time. I appreciate you listening to me. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate you. I just love that you come into the office and say, I need some service work. And so here you are. That's awesome. Stephen, what do you have to say?
Well, is somebody going to give me a timer? I might set a world's record and finish early. Okay, thank you. Was Steve Alcoholic.
Hi, Steve.
And thank you, Lara, for setting this up for us, and Jeffrey for what you had to say, and Lisa. I was able to listen to you, Lisa. I got past the part that you're in Kihei and I'm not. And just great stuff about Tradition One. And what I wanted to talk a little bit about Tradition One is the years and the studies and all that I've heard Tradition One read and have gone to tradition workshops and stuff. To me, it almost was always like on the conceptual level, like this is what it means and it's really cool, but here's how we are. And to bring it, like other people have talked about tonight, to an individual experience. I've talked with some people not too long ago, and it was really cool, because if our common welfare comes first, this might be a great topic at a meeting too. If you just put out the open-ended question, what is our common welfare? And you would think just from the term common welfare, you'd get one answer. But if 5 people talk, you usually get 5 different ideas, which nothing's wrong with that. What I've come to see, and what I think is our common welfare is an opportunity for everyone to get well. And do the groups I go to, or groups in general, do we provide that opportunity for everyone to get well? So I got a story about that. So Sunday I was at a meeting, and the chairperson had very strong opinions about a political party in our country. Very strong opinions, and how they were affecting her emotional sobriety, and her solution to try and be at peace with what she felt was just untenable politicians. Well, in that meeting, this was a Zoom meeting. In that meeting, there was another person who was very much in favor of the political party the chairperson didn't like. And it didn't start out like, this party or that party, but it was the chairperson couldn't be happy with what's going on. And the person that was taking offense left the meeting. And the people at this meeting, there was no newcomers. I mean, I don't know, some people from say 2 or 3 or 4 years to 30 or 40 years. But I was thinking, how did we provide a welcoming place to get well? And was the reason and there was divisiveness, and you could feel, believe it or not, I've been to Zoom meetings where you can feel tension in the air. You don't have to be at an in-person meeting. And so, I'm not suggesting anybody was good or bad. After the meeting was over, there was a lot of talk about, this person shouldn't have brought up they shouldn't have brought up this, they shouldn't have brought up that other person shouldn't have taken offense, all these should haves and shouldn't haves. But it wasn't, it didn't seem to, this particular meeting didn't seem to generate a sense of opportunity to be well. And so is that a first tradition thing, that as a regular attendee of some of these meetings, that I or other people besides me, do we have a responsibility to the group? And so where do we go? It's like going back to day one. Okay, are we going to have a rule that you don't talk about this or you don't talk about that, and how AAers love rules? And so, do I think any harm was caused? I don't know. I would hope not or anything. But our common welfare comes first. And if our personal recovery depends upon the unity of our group, I would think that as a group, it would be the most important thing to discuss, at a business meeting type format or not during the regular meeting, how can we hold a meeting where people are free to share what they think and not have it be offensive? And maybe that's an impossibility, except I don't know. I've actually never been to a group that has had an incident happen and tried to solve that incident with the first tradition. What is our common welfare? And I'm actually have been part of another group, the in-person group, where there's been some disruptive behavior, where the police have been called. And again, I think of the first tradition. If a guy, how can we provide a place where everyone has the opportunity to get well versus I don't like the way this guy talks or all that kind of stuff. So maybe the very things I'm talking about is what, Bill faced and all that stuff. And who would have guessed? There's many people in AA and in this meeting that have been sober, well, a lot of years longer than Bill was, because, he hadn't died on us. So, and so we're facing circumstances that he never faced. What do you do after we've been sober longer than Bill and Bob? And we can go to the traditions, because I've never heard of a meeting or at a tradition study where people have said the traditions didn't help us. When there's animosity in a group and stuff, if people are sober thinking enough, or sane thinking enough, like if we can get quiet and say, is this conducive to our common welfare? Boy, like Jeffrey was talking about, that humility or lack thereof, it can be a mighty obstacle for people to overcome. And what's interesting about that, and I'm going to stop, with new people, their demand that the way they see things are the way the group should be, not funny like laughing at them. It's so understandable, because we were all there. Here's the way it should be. And the people that have had more experience, hopefully, they can react to that with gentleness instead of, I've been around these many years and this is the way it's done and this is the way it should be done, blah, blah, blah. So with me, tradition one, I like to keep in mind what is the common welfare and the direction I'm going on in with my opinion or whatever. Is it promoting an opportunity for everyone to be well? And that's all I got to say about that, Lara.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah,
Under time, right?
you did good. You had like 45 seconds left.
I forgot to time you, but I think
No, you did great. You all did really great. I was just a quick story. I was so there's this new history book of Western Washington Area 72 that recently has come out. The third edition of Our Stories Disclose, and we're reading that in the morning, and it's fascinating. But when the Seattle group used to be, which was the first group in the Seattle area, when it used to meet at the Alano Club, there, which was up at 915 Pine Street on Capitol Hill, they used to, they had a rule that nobody with alcohol on their breath would be allowed at the meeting. And they soon realized how ridiculous that was. And so so the only rule they had was no smoking opium in the elevators. So that's the only rule.
And there was my elevator in the building.
Yeah. So anyway, I'd like to open up the the meeting to anybody else who'd like to share their experience, strength, and hope with Tradition One, or, questions or whatever anybody would like to share. This meeting is supposed to go for approximately an hour, so we have about 30 minutes room for discussion. Ed, I have a question for you. So I know that your home group is Lake Union Men's Group, and I was reading in Our Stories Disclosed that the first Union Club meeting was at the Swedish Club. So I was wondering if Lake Union Men is a incarnation of the Union Club meeting that used to meet at the Swedish Club.
Yeah, it is. It was started by, I think the first president of the Bon Marché, some 60 years ago. I don't know, a long time ago. So to speak about this tradition, to be honest, I'm never sure where the traditions fit in. I'm a 12-step guy, and I always thought the traditions were kind of the stepchild of the whole program. So I'm really curious, and I stop in and talk to Lara once in a while. So that's why I'm here. But speaking of my home group, Lake Union Men's, an old meeting. I don't know about you guys, but most of us, COVID kind of blew our meetings up, and we did Zoom no meetings, and we did Zoom meetings, and then we started meeting in person. And then when we started meeting in person, there was a young man named Joe in our meeting, and he brought over with him, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Knuckleheads men's meeting up on Capitol Hill, but it's mostly young guys, and a lot of times guys off the street. So we refired our meeting back up, and they, when we fired it up, they just weren't doing it the way we'd been doing it. And, it really irked me. And, the chair of the meeting, we'd always stay around first step, and the chair of the meeting was talking too long. We took a break after the preamble, and the break was too long. You're supposed to have birthday people chair the meeting, and they weren't doing that. I mean, a bunch of us kind of got all in a lather about it, but we didn't get in that big a lather, but we didn't like it. We liked it the way it was. And so many things in my life, I've learned through recovery and AA is, when I feel that way, the best thing I can do is zip it and just keep my mouth shut. And it's brought back to me in my meeting, my home group, the humility with which I walked into that room to begin with, and I just, we're just alcoholics, we're just AA. We're just an AA meeting, and we're alcoholics. We're no big deal, and our doors wide open. And now, the last few months, as I've sat in this meeting, it's for me, it's just been re-energized, because we've got back, as I realize this is a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous to help the alcoholic who still suffers. And a lot of these young men are just that, just coming in off the street, and listening to them, boy, it's really helped me. And so I read this tradition, and it just reminds me of my experience the last 6 months or so as my meetings changed yet again. And the other thing that we thought we might get it looked like we might get kicked out of the Swedish Club, but one day we will, because they're going to probably redevelop that property. But it made me realize that our meeting isn't predicated upon the location, or it's not predicated on the way we've been doing things. It's the principles. It's the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous, and so that's what reading today. I read it before we started our meeting. The first tradition, and hearing you guys, is I think, it brings me back that, AA and is it's not about me, it's about something bigger than me. And I don't want to forget that. But yes, Steve, that's a long answer to your question. Yes, that one you read was Lake Union. Yeah.
Mike Ward's meeting.
Yeah, I mean, what night does your home group meet, Lake
We
Union?
meet at Thursday night at 7.
Okay, great.
We know
7 to-
You know, ball-headed Mike W. from that meeting.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
Brian who makes pancakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. I'm glad you're here, Ed. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything to share on Tradition One, or?
I'll share just a few words. Number one, thank you, Jeffrey and Lisa and Stephen for sharing, for taking the lead in this meeting. I really enjoyed hearing everyone's thoughts on it. And like you said, Ed, this the idea of, well, number one, whenever, if I ever showed up at a meeting and they said, oh, it's a tradition study tonight, and I'd go, oh. And I thought, that's so weird that for some reason, the uninvestigated opinion that I had about traditions was that they weren't as exciting as the steps. But yet they are, as was pointed out, as important as the 12 steps, the 12 steps being our individual recovery, and the traditions, from what I've read, is the health of the groups. And so, and we obviously need both of those, and AAers, hopefully to be exposed to them. And I think that's why we read the traditions at some meetings, not every meeting, but they are read, for a purpose, for a reason. And this idea of unity, and you were talking about this, Ed, about the principles of the program, and the principle in Tradition One, it says, our common welfare depends on AA unity. And the principle of unity is everyone wants to be included, that this whole, AA as a whole. And we all make up that whole. And these this tradition, gives us that that exposure, I guess you could say, that exposure to allowing everyone to have a voice, even if their view is unpopular, and like you mentioned, Lisa, it applies to every area of our life. It has to. It can't apply here and not there. I mean, but we have an opportunity, as you mentioned, Stephen. It's an opportunity to get well in all areas of our life. Because judgment does come up, right, in a business meeting or in a meeting, and like you said, Ed, I can close my mouth and I can take that home and I can look at that. Right. And to integrate myself, into the whole instead of separating myself. So I really appreciated this discussion on Tradition One. And, if love and tolerance is our code, then that goes right along with the first tradition. I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thanks, Nancy.
So Lara, you got anything for us?
Well, yeah, I do. And my name's Lara, I'm an alcoholic. So for those of you, maybe some of you know and some of you don't, that Bill Wilson wrote about the 12 traditions first in the Grapevine, before he wrote the 12 and 12, or before the traditions were accepted by the General Service Conference in 1950. So he wrote about Tradition One in December 1947 issue of Grapevine, and it's really only about 6 paragraphs. So I'd like to read that, if that's okay. Our whole AA program is securely founded on the principle of humility, that is to say, perspective, which implies, among other things, that we relate ourselves rightly to God and to our fellows, that we each see ourselves as we really are, which is a small part of a great whole. Seeing our fellows thus, we shall enjoy group harmony. That is why AA tradition can confidently state our common welfare comes first. And as my sponsor likes to say, I'm just a grain of sand on the beach of life, right? Does this mean, some will ask, that in AA the individual doesn't count too much? Is he swallowed up, dominated by the group? No, it doesn't seem to work out that way. Perhaps there's no society on earth more solicitous of personal welfare, more careful to grant the individual the greatest possible liberty of belief and action. Alcoholics Anonymous has no musts. Few AA groups impose penalties on anyone for nonconformity. We do suggest, but we don't discipline. Instead, compliance or noncompliance with any principle of AA is a matter for conscience of the individual. He is the judge of his own conduct. Those words of old time, judge not, we observe most literally. But, some will argue, if AA has no authority to govern its individual members or groups, how shall it ever be sure that the common welfare does come first? How is it possible to be governed without a government? If everyone can do as he pleases, how can you have aught but anarchy? The answer seems to be that we AAs cannot really do as we please, though there is no constituted human authority to restrain us. Actually, our common welfare is protected by powerful safeguards. The moment any action seriously threatens the common welfare, group opinion mobilizes to remind us our conscience begins to complain. If one persists, he may become so disturbed as to get drunk. Alcohol gives him a beating. Group opinions shows him that he is off the beam. His own conscience tells him that he is dead wrong, and if he goes too far, barleycorn brings him real conviction. So it is we learn that in matters deeply affecting the group as a whole, our common welfare comes first. Rebellion ceases and cooperation begins because it must. We have disciplined ourselves. Eventually, of course, we cooperate because we really wish to. We see that without substantial unity, there can be no AA, and that without AA, there can be little lasting recovery for anyone. We gladly set aside personal ambitions whenever these might harm AA. We humbly confess that we are but a small part of a great whole. So that kind of gets to the humility that Jeffrey initially just started this conversation with. And you know, I've too have been part of a group where an individual has caused great disharmony within the group, and it's, you know, it's really a difficult situation because the group wants to you know, you can't kick anyone out of AA is always the, you know, of course nobody can get kicked out of AA. But if somebody is too disruptive to the group unity, one individual is not worth the group's unity, as it plainly says here. But love and tolerance of others is our code. So it's a fine, you know, it's a beam. It's a beam. It's a straight line that we have to try to maneuver. And you know, strong alcoholic personalities that are, you know, firmly trenched in mental illness really take each group to task. And so that's just one of the things that we get to deal with in Alcoholics Anonymous and in our groups. But I really enjoy unity, and I do enjoy what Lisa said about how all the traditions point back to unity. That's what these traditions are about, is keeping Alcoholics Anonymous together so that we can continue to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. So that's what I have to say about that. Is there anybody else that would like to share?
Wouldn't it be cool if somebody was having a birthday and they shared?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
like somebody, I think somebody is having a birthday.
Who
Steve? Steve, are you having a birthday this month?
Today.
Well, it's a matter of fact, I am.
Yeah.
Hey!
I think it's so.
Thank you very much. I'm Steve Alcoholic.
Hey, Steve.
And yeah, I had a distinct pleasure of having a birthday on the 19th of this month and had 33 years of sobriety. So, and I got that through the common welfare of and the unity of the program as it's laid out. So thank you very much. And thank you for all that's been said. You know, I've been to a lot of tradition studies, and you never cease to hear a new message. And I can say that this setting right here is our common welfare, you know, because unity isn't, it doesn't automatically, it's not automatically preserved. You know, it only is preserved by the people that are in it through the people that we are, and who we are is people who believe in a higher power, that do the work, that try to be a part of this, and we want to carry these traditions forward. You know, that's, I believe, our common welfare is the people who come together by God, you know, bringing us together to make what Alcoholics Anonymous is. I don't take credit for that. I don't think anybody needs to take credit for it. I think it's a it's a divine intervention that brings us all together, that helps us to find a way. Just like Bill W. and Bob got together, you know, that's what's happened here. And you know, I love the fact that you know, I always think of unity as the great ego deflator, because I can't be all about me and not have unity in mind, right? Because, well, that means that I'm selfish and self-centered, right? And that's not what unity means. So I love this shit. I hope I can cuss like that, right? I mean, I absolutely love this because it shows me that Alcoholics Anonymous, even in this little group, is still strong. You know, people are still out here working towards a solution, and it's a few of us at here and a few of us over there that, you know, we all have this in mind. And this is what we're supposed to be doing. So this is big stuff. And I love what Ed said about the COVID thing, because, you know, I got to thinking about it. That was a really good test of what unity was. When we came out of COVID and we started having our first in-person meetings, and, you know, how much hand sanitizer do you put out? How many masks do you have? You know, can you touch a book and pass it? Do you need gloves? I mean, oh, you know, but we all get through it, right? And that's what the program has done for us. That's what the layout has done for us. So I'll be forever grateful. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve.
So we have about 11 minutes, so we have time for a couple more people to share. Who would like to share?
How about an Anacortes friend?
Yeah, Robert.
Where's Anacortes?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Hi, I'm Robert Anacortes, and alcoholic.
Hey,
And
Robert.
we had an experience here at the Fidalgo group, which is 46 years, a 46-year-old group. One of the members, who had just celebrated 44 years, passed away. And there was a meeting soon thereafter that really acted like a very, very wonderful memorial service. Here's a guy that could easily be described as a survivor, more than that, an elder statesman. There was a quiet strength to him. He had an admirable and exemplary experience among us. And it was really wonderful to be able to see how that man influenced the lives of everybody in that room. There's probably 25 people, and I would say to a person, everybody had something to share about his impact in his life. That's what keeps me coming back, is to be able to know that I'm in very, very good company. In preparing to perhaps get back into general service, I was reading a little bit today about Pass It On. And I guess there was a working, before this was actually referred to as, when they were fully developed, these traditions, Bill referred to as working title to 12 points to assure our future. And I don't know about you guys, but my future was looking very, very bleak, and my life was very small. And the idea of not only assuring my own future by being whole and well, and again, maintaining good company, because you all are going to be a part of my life support system, as Steve C., a former delegate, says, is I can be thorny about things. I can get picayune about stuff, but I have to be able to drop the plumb line of truth in the middle of all those thoughts, and see that I might even be right, but how does that drop to the bottom line of our common welfare and unity? So thank you very much for this evening.
Thanks, Robert. We're glad you showed up tonight.
Thank you.
See a lady waving in the corner with that.
Yeah, Laura, I think she was thanking Robert for sharing, but maybe she'd like to share.
I was, but I would love to talk about this because I love these I love the traditions. I love them. And I was also that person who would just be like, oh shoot, it's tradition night. I meant to skip it, and then I would, I wasn't in a half measure seat by the door or whatever and couldn't get out, or was just too embarrassed, right? People pleasing is my number one thing, so I had to sit there through the traditions, and I never got a lot out of them because I couldn't apply. I didn't see the value, right? I couldn't see. I was new in sobriety, and it was all about me, right? It was all about me, and the idea that, but in saying that, I want to say that, like, the group that I walked into, because I was told that I would die if I didn't find my way into Alcoholics Anonymous, practiced this tradition. They practiced this tradition, and they had the unity to know, they were of one mind in what their primary purpose were. They were armed with the facts about themselves, and they understood what was wrong with me and could carry a message of depth and weight. And, it's like just the very idea that these people who showed up as sick as I was, through the practice of these traditions, was able to do that and, save this alcoholic and others after that. It's amazing to me. And, the thing that it says, like in the 12 and 12, about how we go along at first because we must, but then later we find that we kind of want to be obedient to the spiritual principles. Like, this is a crazy idea to me that in fact is true. It's like one of the promises for me that I haven't, without even really knowing it, it snuck up on me that I want my, when I get in a lather about something going on with the personalities in my home group, I realize that it's all driven by the fear that my home group is going to disappear, that it's going to blow up. I mean, there's only one group on the island that is not a men's group that's connected to AA as a whole, and that's my home group. And I freaking love my home group, and I don't know what I would do without my home group. Because this idea that to be a part, to be able to get better, to be able to be a part of something, to be able to be a part of this and this recovery, it's going to require some humility, as does every tradition I've come to see. It's that's mind-boggling too. I mean, for this alcoholic who I only ever thought about myself and didn't even think that was true. I was so far away from the truth of that statement, that the constant humility required in practicing the traditions is, oh man, it's something that keeps me just, keeps me grounded again and again. And I love it that Lisa read from the traditions checklist, because I keep it I keep it with me and in my book to kind of take a look at it every now and then to ask myself, how am I doing? How am I doing with these things? And finally, I have a dear friend in Dallas, Texas, who I met through Alcoholics Anonymous. And, we met because I needed a ride to a meeting, and I fly for an airline. I'm based down there. And so I'm sitting there not knowing where I am. And they show up down in Texas, and she showed up and she took me to a meeting. And as years have gone by, we've become very close. I now stay in their home. I'm one of their family, right? And like any good family, we have exact opposite politics. And she's very opinionated about her politics. And I was really like, what am I going to do? This isn't working. I can't, I'm having that feeling like, I can't love this person. This is crazy. I love this person. And I talked to my sponsor, and she said, you know what? We don't have opinions on outside issues. And our primary, and what we are here to do is to fit ourselves to be of maximum usefulness to God and our fellows. And that having those opinions gets in the way of being able to do that. And then it also makes us, creators of disharmony and chaos. And just having, I had a conversation with my friend. I said, can we not talk about this? And I, happily, she's a strong AA person. And so, I got to mention some of these things, and I was really afraid what would happen. And she said, Laura, I needed to hear that today, and I was so grateful. I was so grateful for this. And I'm in, I freaking love the traditions, and I see how they can, how the principles that are held within them can help us just function and navigate through these really difficult kind of situations, and it's like, we are never going to agree on the things that she believes versus, and that's okay. That's okay. And I never in my life could have ever been able to maintain a relationship that is based on that deep level of love and based on principles that are so much bigger than any of that nonsense. So I'm really super grateful for it. And I'm really glad to be here tonight. And thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your experience and thoughts on these traditions. I learn something all the time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I'm really glad you're here. So there's a couple minutes. Is there anybody else who'd like to share? Well, I will thank you again for everybody showing up. I think that's great. And I do really would like to reiterate that Dr. Bob and Bill W. turned over this fellowship to us, and it is actually our great responsibility to uphold and become the custodians of our traditions, to assure the future of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I just applaud everybody who's here and willing to learn more about the traditions and explore them, so that we can, make sure that Alcoholics Anonymous is around for the alcoholic that's not yet born. So thank you very much for coming.
And we've got some real exciting speakers next for
Remind
tradition
me when the
2.
next
also.
one is.
Yeah.
When is the next one?
So it'll be the fourth Tuesday of every month. And off the top of my head, let's look. That's going to be February 27th.
Wow.
Will be the date next month. So I appreciate everybody coming.
So the last day of the month, is it close to it?
Today, this February is the
there's-
29th.
Yeah. Thanks,
Oh,
everybody.
this
I'm
will
gonna.
leave you, ain't it?
Yeah,
I appreciate you coming.
thank
Hi,
God.
Irene. Sorry, we're just closing the meeting.